I stood there with my hands cuffed behind my back, bleeding from a split lip, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a problem. No one asked who I was. No one cared. A group of officers barked orders and shoved me like I was a threat, like I wasn't the man who once pulled his brothers out of burning wreckage in Kandahar. But I didn't say a word. Not even when the cuffs dug into the wrist that still bore the scars of shrapnel. Not even when they called me a liar. Then, like thunder rolling over a quiet field, the unmistakable sound of military trucks filled the air. Camouflage Humvees rolled in from every corner. Soldiers jumped out, not with guns raised, but with purpose in their eyes. And leading them was the man who once called me a hero. Within minutes, the entire block was surrounded. And suddenly, the same people who mocked me, hurt me, and ignored my story were saluting. This is not just a tale of injustice. It's a military tribute to a forgotten hero, and a reminder that true valor never fades, even when the world forgets. The neighborhood had changed since I returned from deployment. What used to be a tight-knit street, where kids rode bikes and neighbors shared coffee over fences, now carried the tension of a place worn down by fear and silence. I didn't blame the people. Life moves on. Wars end, but soldiers carry pieces of them long after. I moved quietly through life, working at a nearby auto shop, doing what I could to stay under the radar. My uniform hung in the back of my closet, my medals locked away in a shoebox. But that morning, everything unraveled. I was walking back from the corner store, groceries in hand, when a commotion broke out on the next block. 2 young men were being questioned by police. One of them, barely older than my youngest squad mate, had been in Afghanistan. I didn't recognize the kids, but the fear in their eyes was all too familiar. Then came the shouting, accusations, confusion, and I made a mistake. I stepped in. "Sir," I said calmly to one of the officers. "Maybe if you let them explain." That's when it turned on me. The officer didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask what I saw. He just shoved me against the hood of a car. I felt the cold steel of the handcuffs snap shut. And for the first time in years, I wasn't in my hometown. I was back in the desert, under a collapsed wall, trying to pull a friend to safety, while bullets shattered the air. I winced, not from pain, but from memory. "Stop resisting," they yelled. Though I hadn't moved, my neighbors watched from behind curtains. One woman whispered, "Isn't that the vet? The one who helped after the fire last year?" Another man shook his head. "Couldn't be." Number 1 stepped forward. They didn't see the soldier. Just a man with a beard, wearing old boots, in the wrong place. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But inside, something fractured. Because I had spent years serving a country that now saw me as a threat. I sat on the curb, hands still cuffed behind my back, the midday sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Blood dried on my cheek, but I didn't flinch. I'd taken worse hits in places where no one came to help. Still, this wasn't a battlefield. This was supposed to be home. The officers stood nearby, talking among themselves. One of them laughed, mocking me in a way I had heard far too often since returning. What kind of vet gets involved in street trash? Probably faking it. They all say they served. They had no idea. No clue what it meant to carry a dying friend on your back through enemy fire. No clue what it meant to keep fighting long after your soul begged you to stop. But I didn't give them the satisfaction of a response. Silence became my armor, the same armor I used when comrades fell, when the letters from home stopped coming, and when I stared down the dark and didn't blink. Then I saw her, a little girl across the street, maybe 10 years old. She peeked out from behind her mother's leg and waved a small, innocent gesture. She remembered. 2 years ago, I had pulled her from a burning car, just blocks from here. Her father never forgot. Neither did she. Her mother held her hand tightly and whispered something to her. The girl nodded, broke free, and disappeared behind a parked car. Moments later, I saw her sprinting toward a corner house, one that flew an American flag, faded from years of rain and sun. That house belonged to Colonel Joseph Hart, retired U.S. Army, my former commanding officer, the man who pinned the bronze star on my chest after I carried 3 wounded men through enemy territory. What I didn't know, what the officers couldn't predict, was that the girl's father, a quiet man with a limp and a heavy heart, had been watching from that very house. And he made a call, not to 911, not to local police. He called a friend in the National Guard. They say the wheels of justice turn slowly. But when soldiers call soldiers, when a brother calls a brother, things move faster than anyone expects. Colonel Hart didn't hesitate. He knew my story. He'd read the citations. But more importantly, He knew my character, and that was all he needed. Within minutes, the alert was sent. A National Guard patrol unit, already on standby due to unrelated citywide drills, rerouted. Not with weapons drawn, not with anger, but with purpose and authority. And they didn't come to start a fight. They came to recognize one of their own. Back on the street, the officers were starting to notice the change in atmosphere. First came the faint rumble, like distant thunder rolling in. Then came the unmistakable sight, for military vehicles turning onto the block. One officer muttered, "What the hell is this?" Another took a step back, and I just looked up. Still cuffed, still silent, but now with the calm of a soldier who knew the tide had turned. The lead vehicle stopped directly in front of me. Out stepped Colonel Hart, still upright, still commanding, still carrying the presence of a man who had led hundreds into danger, and brought most of them home. He didn't speak to the officers first. He walked directly to me. "Sergeant Hawkins," he said, his voice steady but laced with quiet fury. "What the hell happened here?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Not from fear, from restraint. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. Didn't want revenge. I just wanted to go home. Colonel Hart turned to the officers. "Uncuff him," he ordered. The youngest one stammered, "Sir, we were told." "I didn't ask what you were told. I'm telling you, you've cuffed a decorated war hero. He saved lives overseas, and he saved lives right here on this very street. Remove the cuffs." Their hands trembled as they obeyed. As the cold steel came off my wrists, I flexed my hands slowly, letting the blood return. Colonel Hart looked me in the eye, then saluted. I returned it, crisp, clean, the way he taught me. And then came the moment I'll never forget. The entire block fell silent as guardsmen stepped out of their vehicles, not with weapons, but with honor. One by one, they lined the sidewalk. One by one, they saluted. Not because I asked, not because I yelled, but because they knew, they remembered. The moment those guardsmen lifted their hands in salute, everything shifted. The air turned still. No sirens, no shouting, just the sound of honor reclaiming its place. People began to emerge from their homes, slowly at first. Curtains twitched, doors cracked open, children clung to their parents' sides. Word traveled faster than the wind. The National Guard is here, and they're saluting him. The same man they saw handcuffed an hour earlier, the same man they had whispered about, the same man they had doubted, and now all of them saw what they hadn't before, a soldier who had never stopped serving, even in silence. Colonel Hart turned toward the officers again, his voice low but firm, like he was back in a command tent on foreign soil. "Which of you laid hands on this man?" None of them spoke. Until one, the youngest, barely out of the academy, cleared his throat. "Sir, I didn't know who he was." "That's the problem," Hart said. "You don't need to know his name to treat him with respect. You don't need to see medals to recognize a human being." The lieutenant who had ordered my arrest tried to interject. "Sir, he interfered with police business." Hart cut him off like a whip crack. "He intervened because he's a man of principle, because when he sees someone in danger, he acts, he doesn't wait. That instinct has saved more lives than you'll ever count." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was revelatory. Everyone was suddenly looking at me differently, not as a suspect, not even just as a veteran, but as a man who had quietly carried the weight of war, and never once asked for applause. Then the reporters showed up. Someone must have called them. Maybe that little girl's family. Maybe someone live streaming from a window. Either way, the cameras arrived just in time to capture what happened next. Colonel Hart stood at my side as he addressed the press. "This man's name is Sergeant Daniel Hawkins. United States Army, retired. He served 3 tours. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, 10 confirmed rescues under fire. He didn't come home to parades. He came home to a quiet street, a mechanic's job, and a life of humility. Today," Hart continued, "he was handcuffed, bruised, and humiliated for trying to de-escalate a situation with words, not weapons. But what matters most isn't what happened to him. It's how he responded. With restraint, with dignity, with courage. That," he said, pointing at me, "is what real war heroes look like. That's your military tribute today." The community began to shift before our eyes. The father of one of the boys in the original incident came forward, tears in his eyes. "I didn't know who you were," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm sorry. I took it, not because he owed me anything, but because he didn't. Because healing doesn't come from revenge, it comes from recognition." One by one, Others approached neighbors, former skeptics, even a city council member who lived down the block. And then came the most unexpected moment of all. The officer who cuffed me, the one who laughed earlier, stepped forward, eyes downcast. "I was wrong," he said. "I let the badge make me blind. I forgot what service looks like outside the uniform." He looked up, tears at the edge of his voice. Can I shake your hand, sir?" I paused, looked him in the eye, and I nodded, not because he deserved it, but because this was bigger than both of us. Later that evening, the mayor arrived. Not for a photo op, for damage control. He offered an apology, a public one, and then announced a new program, a Veterans in Community Response Initiative, pairing retired servicemen with local police units for training, de-escalation, and emergency mediation. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start that wouldn't have happened without that salute. The story spread quickly across the city. Then the state news headlines read, "Veteran wrongfully detained, National Guard steps in, unsung hero honored in surprise military, tribute from handcuffs to salutes. A real war hero's quiet strength." But none of that mattered as much as the people. The girl who waved at me earlier. She came by with a drawing of me and Colonel Hart, saluting under the flag. Her father started volunteering at a local vet support center. The young men involved in the original police stop. Both wrote letters of thanks, calling me the man who taught us what courage looks like without a uniform. That day didn't just change me. It reminded an entire block, and maybe more, that courage doesn't end on the battlefield. It lives in quiet acts, in calm restraint, in standing tall, even when the world tries to knock you down. That salute didn't just honor me, it reminded every forgotten veteran out there that they are seen. The following week, I went back to the auto shop. No cameras, no soldiers, just greased under my nails and the familiar hum of engines. But something had shifted. Not in the city, in me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was hiding behind civilian clothes. I didn't feel like I had to tuck away the parts of myself shaped by the war, by sacrifice, by the men I couldn't bring home. I'd always told myself I didn't need recognition, and maybe I still don't. But what happened on that street proved something greater. That the sacrifices veterans make don't vanish when the uniform comes off. They live on in every action, every scar, every quiet moment we choose dignity over rage. And sometimes, they echo loud enough to awaken a city. The mayor kept his promise. A month later, he unveiled a plaque on that very street corner. It didn't have my name in bold letters. It had something better. To every veteran whose silence was louder than sirens. To every act of courage the world almost missed. We see you now. A crowd gathered. Former doubters stood beside me. This time not out of guilt, but respect. The little girl held my hand as the ribbon was cut. Cameras flashed, but my eyes drifted toward a row of older men in the back. Veterans. Vietnam, Iraq, Korea. Men with tired eyes and proud hearts. They nodded. A silent brotherhood. Colonel Hart and I shared a final meal a few days later. He looked at me with that same steel in his gaze. But it softened as he raised his glass. He stood taller than most men would. "Hawkins," he said, "not in uniform, in injustice. You carried yourself like a soldier, without needing the battlefield." I just smiled. "Guess some wars don't need bullets," I replied. He nodded. "But they still need heroes." In the weeks that followed, letters poured in from across the country. Veterans who had felt invisible. Families who'd lost loved ones. People who finally understood that real war heroes don't always come home to applause. But they still deserve one. One letter in particular stays with me. It was from a young woman in Texas. Her father had taken his life after returning from combat. She wrote, "I never got to see my dad saluted, but watching you get yours felt like someone finally saluted him too." I wept, not out of grief, out of shared understanding, because this was never just about me. This was a story for every man and woman who ever wore the flag on their shoulder and came back to a world too distracted to notice. This was for the ones who stepped into chaos with no guarantee of return, for those who served in silence, and still do. Today, I keep that letter framed beside my medals, and the handcuffs. I still have them too, not out of bitterness, out of remembrance that they remind me that injustice exists, but so does redemption. And sometimes, it takes one forgotten hero to remind the world what honor really means. Now when I walk down that street, people don't turn away. They smile, they stop, sometimes, they salute. Not because I'm special, because they finally understand. The cost of freedom doesn't end when the war does. It continues in every overlooked vet, every quiet act of bravery, every soldier who returns and still stands ready, even if no one's watching. This isn't just my story. It's a military tribute to every soul who gave more than their country will ever know. It's a salute to the unsung heroes who never asked to be remembered, but deserve to be. It's emotional storytelling for those who still carry the weight of battle in a peaceful world. So if you see someone today who wears old boots, who walks with a limp, who speaks less than they listen, don't wait for a uniform to give you permission to respect them. Because real valor doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be seen.